Thenmozhi is filmmaker, a transmedia artist, and a storyteller. She tells about casteism within the Indian diaspora, also involved in creation of Dalit History Month. She also served AANA board as a woman president, only woman president. Thank you so much, Thenmozhi. Please give her a warm round of applause. Please welcome. Over to you, Thenmozhi.
Oh, sure. Thank you. And it's such an honor to be here with everybody and also to follow such powerful guests, because it really shows what kind of possibility we have in these dark times when we see such lights like Manjuladi and Ashok come forward. So it's really, really great to be here. I also think it's so powerful to really think about what we are doing now as AANA and as a global Ambedkar community this Memorial Day weekend, because it's a time for us to come together to renew and build a vision of power and justice for all of our people. And we need that vision now more than ever, particularly as we see how COVID-19 has wreaked havoc on all of our communities, both here in India and in the United States. And, you know, one of the things I was just so struck by, you know, even last night is that, you know, our area has so many different vulnerabilities, whether it's what we've seen COVID-19 laid bare or the damage that the super typhoon Amphan has done in Bengal. Our area of the world that we all come from is actually ground zero for many, many, many intersectional violences. And what we have to do now is really rise to this occasion and take this historical moment as the opportunity to become Dr. Ambedkar's dream. And that we have to become change makers, not just for our people, but for the world. And it's a very powerful testament that, you know, every single person in AANA has answered that call and has grown as leaders and has taken steps to organize and build in ways that we have never done before. And, you know, I think one of the things that I was so proud was to see that AANA had a record year of donations and supported over 50 to 60 you know, grassroots institutions on the ground that come from our community that were serving issues as vast as like migrant people to trans justice issues to people who are working with women. And I think that this capacity that we have just stepped into, we cannot leave. In fact, we must lean into and keep building, and we cannot afford to stop because the situation is dire. And, you know, if everyone, you know, at some level, many of the people that I've been talking to, you know, there isn't one person on this call or in this planet that isn't worried about what comes next. And, you know, sometimes you might wake up in the middle of the night and wonder, you know, what is the future? What will happen for our children? What will happen for our people and our country? And I think that, you know, when we ask those questions of anxiety and fear, we also must practice that Buddhist idea of non-attachment, because we can have those feelings, but we can also let them go, because fundamentally, everything matters in terms of what we do now will determine the future. And this is definitely not a time that we can say is deficit of hope. Every single one of the speakers is examples of ways that our community is building hope through our actions that happen right now. And I think when we look at our ancestral legacies, we have so much resilience that we can tap into. So I know, for example, like I was having a lot of conversations with my mom about her grandparents who survived the first plague, just like Savitribai did. And, you know, the resilience of like how they made food last for a very long time, or despite the fact that, you know, Dalit Bahujan communities were pushed aside in measures for medicine, and how people would like take care of each other and keep tender with each other, even if the rest of the world abandoned, you know, our charity. And I think this is really what's really important now, is that when we don't know what to do about the future, we must dig into the roots of our past. And when you look at powerful Bahujan figures like Ayankali and Periyar and Jyotiba and Savitribai Phule, and of course Ambedkar, ours is an architecture of resilience. And that's what we need to really inspire our children and our families and our sanghas and really the global Ambedkarite community to be driven by. And, I think that part of what our goal has to look like is that COVID-19 exposed all of the infrastructure of violence and systemic inequity. And as we rebuild as a species to create the new world, we don't have to recreate systemic caste violence. We can recreate a caste liberatory future. And that's why so much of what we do now means we have to really engage in all of the efforts to fight this virus, but also to build political power so that the violence that pre-existed before this pandemic does not exist. And I think that, one of the things that I was going to just kind of help, give some context, because I was just preparing for that in looking at our conversations, is that, one of the big realities of what COVID-19 is going to mean for South Asia is that it's going to dump hundreds of millions of people back into poverty. And that many of the poverty alleviation measures that happened in the last 15 to 20 years are going to be wiped away just like that. And to give you some context, like with India, we have, a quarter of the Indian population lives below the poverty line, and over 500 million people are employed in the informal sector. So those are the fruitwalas, or people that are driving the rickshaws, or are selling small goods, or in the garment district. So there's very little worker protections, and also people are just barely hanging on with what they had before COVID-19 hit. Now that COVID-19 has come, a new 400 million workers will be going into deeper poverty. And 50% of the newly added poor are coming from the states of UP, Bihar, Maharashtra, West Bengal, and Madhya Pradesh. So it means all of our people are at risk. And I think that one thing that's really important for us as global Ambedkarites is that really none of us are free until all of us are free. And so, while we are also facing precarious immigration situations in the United States, we are not in hunger. And in some ways, like whatever we can do, we want to really begin to create a practice in our community of whatever our salary is, just to put a little bit every month away to be able to support our brothers and sisters who are in need. And this, even if it's like $50 or $100, even if it's $5, if 1,000 people gave $5 every month, we would have $5,000 every month to be able to support our mutual aid efforts. And I think this is the kind of ambitious scale of support that we must build right now, because no one is actually coming to protect our community. The Brahminwad government of the Modi administration literally will spend more money on press and the BJP IT cell than they will in giving rice and dal and some sort of support to our vulnerable brothers and sisters right now. And so if no one else is coming to save us, we must be the people who stand with each other to come out on the other end. And I think that, in thinking about ways that we as a global Ambedkarite community can be unified in this process, I really want to see, for example, if we can commit to a consistent pledge from the global Ambedkarite community to assist our communities in distress. And I know that this was the first time that AANA was, AANA and really all of the national Ambedkarite groups were able to raise such a big figure for this piece. But if we are able to have a goal of raising that much every 2 to 3 months, we know that we can continue to support many of those groups who actually have not got any replenishment funds. So that initial piece of money that we gave them, they are all still struggling to find funds all the time. So if we have that ability to kind of commit as a group of families who will support and be lifelines to many people, I think that is like such a powerful gift right away that is important, and that no one is filling that role. I think the additional thing to think about, particularly because we have so many entrepreneurs in the global Ambedkarite community, is that we want to think about mutual aid, not just in the context of rice and dal and these immediate rapid response efforts, but we also want to think about mutual aid in terms of the investment of capital. And that many of the informal workers whose livelihoods were taken out were actually entrepreneurs in and of themselves. They were the fruit wallahs. They were people who were making small artisans and creating their own collective, or people who are running rickshaws, what have you. As their income is devastated, they will want to start up their economies again as they go back to different service jobs. And there's very few capital for our network of communities, but there will be lots of money for the Reliances and the Ambanis and the Tatas. And as we see this like heavy caste segregation in terms of the relief funds that are being given, we want to keep an eye on of how we can be strategic in supporting those that need it, not just for the immediate hunger needs, but also for them to get back on their feet and really move forward. And so maybe like in preparation for thinking about how to plan for that post-COVID moment, people who are already part of entrepreneurial groups might be thinking about ways that they could offer entrepreneurial workshops in a continued COVID-19 way. Maybe there's a way to put together a level of social entrepreneur funds that come from companies we work with, that maybe we could try to get a starter fund from AANA to be able to just offer even 500 or 1,000 to entrepreneurs that are starting up again. Whatever that looks like, that is really moving from this model of not just giving a fish, but teaching a man to fish or teaching people to fish. And it's really what's going to be needed to help rebuild this sector at a massive way. And Ambedkarites, again, can be a major part of what that looks like. I think the other thing that I think is really important that I really want to encourage everyone to think about, particularly as we head to the November 2020 elections, is that here in the United States, we are facing a decisive historical showdown between the forces of fascism and the forces of democracy. And, you know, I think what's important is that, you know, this does not have to be a partisan position. This is really about the fact that everyone in AANA has a role to play in terms of participating more actively in civic life. And there are many ways that you can be part and plugged into your community efforts now that will actually pay off not just in 2020, but in greater Ambedkarite political power all across the board. So one, and I think that we've been talking about this in different areas, is that we really want to encourage folks to really think about building long-lasting relationships with your congressional offices, whatever state that you are in. And one of the things I think about when I think about AANA is that we actually have chapters in many swing states, and that really makes us a powerful vote and a powerful engager of the South Asian community. And so, you know, I know, like, for example, Mahesh was able to get a letter for the first time from his congresspeople against the CAA, and that's a great like example of like the beginning of a relationship that starts with this ask of a letter, but can continue to be built in order to build powerful relationships so that we can draw on them, and more importantly, they can draw on us. Because with many of these state offices, the only people that they've met from the Indian American community has either been people from the Sikh Coalition or people from the Hindu American Foundation. They've not really consistently met across the board members of Bahujan American communities. And I think that this is why when we did our congressional briefing in about caste discrimination in the US, it was such a powerful ripple throughout the entire congressional ecosystem, because it was the first time that they had ever met and talked with someone about the issue of caste, and someone who openly identified as Dalit Bahujan. And a lot of the groundwork that was laid with that congressional briefing actually was one of the main reasons why that Ro Khanna's office approached us to say, hey, we have this short window, we want to work on a resolution related to Dr. Ambedkar, we trust you, let's go. And that's the kind of intimacy that every single Ambedkarite on this session actually can build simply because they're hungry to hear more diverse voices. They don't actually like dealing with Hindu fundamentalists, but if that's the only people that show up to their offices, they're going to assume that that is the South Asian American community. And we actually have so much intellectual talent, so much power and vision and grounding in justice and solidarity that we actually can be the architects of our own freedom. So I want to, one, just really encourage, building those relationships. And many congressional offices have call-in numbers where you can build relationships through phone and email. You can also participate in town halls. Also, you can look and see what are the civic engagement activities happening in your state and just become a volunteer. So right now, there's a lot of efforts in terms of getting out the vote and census conversations. So you could be part of a census outreach team. It might be like, 5 hours of volunteer work a week, but it really pays off because then again, you're building relationships outside of our network into the broader community. The other thing that I think is a really powerful place for people to build power is really in interfaith networks. And AANA is an Ambedkarite Buddhist organization that welcomes all faiths, but we have been most active and have a lot of connections within the socially engaged Buddhist community internationally and nationally. So that gives you a very powerful place in all of the states and cities that you're in to be part of the interfaith networks. And you'll be surprised, but almost every single interfaith network across the country is often the launch platform for Hindu nationalist campaigns at both the city level, the state level, and ultimately the congressional level. And while not everybody in AANA may want to become or run for office, power decisions are made in those interfaith communities, because interfaith isn't just about exchanging faiths, it's actually about communities building with each other. And we need to step into our power and be taken into consideration with all of the rest of the stakeholders in the cities that we're a part of, because we run amazing businesses, we have strong groundings in values and moral alignment at this time. But most importantly, if we don't take a seat at the table that's really for us to take, then who's going to take it is fascists and people who are going to push brahminical values. So that, most importantly, is the reason why to step into those interfaith relationships. And then finally, another area of real possible work is being part of Get Out the Vote efforts. And Get Out the Vote efforts are efforts where people are helping people to register to vote. And, that might feel like a fairly administrative, process, but it's actually a really critical part of base building and organizing, because when you join an effort to help get out the vote, you'll be assigned a certain set of areas in your community, and you're basically door knocking, or in this case, you're making calls. And by doing that, you get a sense of like who your neighbors are, you get a sense of what their issues and their concerns are, but most importantly, you see what they are afraid of in terms of why they don't want to vote. And the more that you are able to make that case and get more voters up and running, this is really what's going to change the engagement in terms of what's possible for November 2020. Because again, I think that one of the things that's so important is that if we do nothing, the nationalists are already aligning. So Steve Bannon is working with a group called the Republican Hindu Coalition, and they're planning to do town halls with every single Hindu temple across the country to get those temple bases to vote for Trump. And, I think that the unfortunate thing is that we are seeing upper caste Hindu networks in the United States be very willingly politicized and align themselves with white nationalists. And really our community, as in terms of the ways that we look at the intersections of caste and race and gender solidarities, we have to really be able to provide an active counter. And this is the moment for us to really build in that way. And that's why I want to say that, again, I know this is a dark time. There's so much additional responsibilities, but
Hi
there's,
T,
yeah.
sorry to interrupt you. Is it possible to wrap up?
Oh,
in some time.
I was actually just about to wrap up.
Yeah, thank you so much. Sorry for
Uh,
interruption.
No, it's okay. I was just going to say is that as difficult as a time as this moment is, it's also a really powerful one where we have the tools of the future in our hands. And I think we should take very deeply the slogan of Dr. Ambedkar in terms of educate, agitate, and organize, not just as a thing that we say to each other, but as a thing that we commit to every day so that we move the needle of what's possible for the future as far as we can towards justice and caste abolition. So with that, thank you, and JB.
Thank you, T, for your great advice. I think we are looking forward to work on it together. I think T is always in forefront and always guiding us. Hats off to the initiative that Equality Lab has undertaken. I think Equality Lab also created a guidelines for COVID in 15 languages and published in India. You are doing commendable work in this field. We are so proud of you, and it's proud to work with you under your leadership. Thank you, T, for your time. Thank you for your support.
Thank you.